Well, wealthy bankers are turning their backs on the coal industry because they want to fit in at inner city dinner parties, according to the CEO of mining giant Adani. Ahead of his appearance in front of a parliamentary inquiry into the regulation of Australia's export industries, Lucas Dow says banking and insurance executives are imperiling the resources sector by withdrawing their funding. LNP MP George Christensen, he is chairing this inquiry ahead of the Parliamentary Committee, and he joins me now from Canberra. George Christensen, straight up, do you agree with Lucas Dow?
Well, I asked Lucas Dow that question today, whether he thought it was that base that, this is all about these CEOs trying to look woke at their high-end soirees that they attend. And he does believe that. And I've got to say that there is an element of that in there. I mean, we've got so much activism, which is across the spectrum when it comes to socio-economic status, but a lot of it in the inner cities, in particular, that's against coal mining. And so this is about banks. This is about the CEOs. This is about the upper management of insurance companies, all wanting to look like they're doing the right thing. I think that he's right, and I think we heard that time and again today from different peak bodies of resources companies, from different resources companies themselves, and also from some of the suppliers of resources company. Because of course, Peter, we had these hearings today where we were hearing from all of these mining companies that had been denied finance or denied insurance or denied reinsurance or refinance or something like that from the banks or insurers for the sin of being a resources company or being a fossil fuel company.
I mean, this is a disconnect, though. I mean, you live in a regional area, right? You live in a community that wouldn't be as prosperous as it is if it wasn't for the resources sector. So these companies based in Sydney or Melbourne are disconnected from where they make their money, from the workers that are employed on the ground in the resources industry. And of course, right across the board, we wouldn't have money for welfare, we wouldn't have money for defence if it wasn't for the bottom line impact of exports of resources. So why on earth are they so far removed from the reality?
100%. And look, this was raised today by many of the representatives of resources companies there. In fact, the Minerals Council threw down a challenge to all the CEOs and the boards of our major banks and insurance companies to actually come down to a place like Claremont or any one of the mining towns that's throughout the Bowen Basin, get your feet dirty, get your hands dirty, and come and talk to the locals and explain to them why your bank or insurance company isn't willing to do business with the industry that's actually keeping that person in a job, but actually is willing to make money off that particular individual, either through the fees that they charge for their bank accounts or through their mortgages or what have you. And it seems that there's a lot of double standards at play. So I've got to tell you that I'm almost tempted for the next session where we have the banks and the insurers in to hold it in Claremont so that they have to go there.
Oh, good on you. I mean, this is another thing too. I think taking some of these parliamentary inquiries out there into the real world really shakes them up. I'm keen, if these big organisations can't get funding from banks, they can't get the capital to expand, it makes them staying in Australia less viable. They go to markets overseas. We've seen that particularly in South America and in Africa for the resources sector. Was this part of your thinking behind initiating this inquiry?
Well, look, it was actually our Resources Minister, Keith Pitt, who initiated the inquiry. He's been concerned about this issue for some time. So have I, to be quite frank. I've been hearing tales from local mining supply businesses, so not your big multinational mining houses. I'm talking about mum and dad engineering outfits, small and medium firms and local firms that derive their money from the mining industry. And they've been saying that insurers walk in and tell them that any more than 40% of your business is derived from mining, from thermal coal mining in particular, and then we walk. There's been banks that have withheld certain services from local suppliers as well. So it affects the coal industry in particular right through the supply chain. But you are dead right that if we have our own banks and our own insurers denying or raising costs on our mining industry, it's just simply going to displace the effort because the demand is going nowhere, despite all that we hear from the Green Movement, from newspapers like The Guardian and so on, that coal is over and the world's shutting down coal-fired power stations. There is growing demand in Southeast Asia and in places like India, where they're actually building coal-fired power stations right now, and so they're going to need demand for those coal-fired power stations over the next 3 decades at least.
I've got to ask you about something. You announced that you wouldn't recontest your seat of Dawson at the next election. People have read your political epitaph many times over, but you defy the critics. You're one of the best marginal seat campaigners I know, so I know there's a high personal vote for you in Dawson. I know the government would love to hold that seat, need to hold that seat at the next election. Has the events of the National Party this week and the move back to Barnaby Joyce now as leader perhaps changed your mind?
Well, thanks, Peter. That's the 752nd time I've been asked this week, but I understand why. Look, there's a change in dynamics in the government, and Barnaby, of all places, in question time in the House, actually said that he wanted me to stay on. And look, it's a great show of support from the leader and from all my colleagues, and I'm getting it every day from people in my electorate and elsewhere that I should stay on. But at the moment, I haven't changed my mind.
Just before we go, I know faith has been a big part of your life, and indeed you fought for a lot of faith issues in the Parliament, the popular and the not so popular. I'm aware of some debates inside the coalition recently in relation to babies born early, prematurely, sometimes as a result of a termination. And you've been speaking out on this issue. Can you tell us where you're up to on doing something in a legislative sense?
Yeah, look, I've got a private members bill drafted that's on the notice paper at the moment, should be introduced in August, I hope, into the Parliament. What it seeks to do is simply apply a duty of care to doctors and other medical practitioners that are there when a baby is born as a result of a termination or an abortion. When the baby's born alive and that baby is viable, there should be every bit of medical treatment and care given to that child to ensure its survivability. Crazy thing is that in hospitals across the country, down one end of the hospital, we've got a baby being born prematurely, and all of the life-saving gear wheeled in, the humidity cribs and all the rest of it to keep that child alive. Over the other end, we might have an abortion being performed where the baby's born as a result of it. The baby might be at the same age in terms of the number of weeks as the premature baby. The baby might be actually in the same state as the premature baby, but nothing is done for that child. That child is simply left to die. And it's actually a breach of the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child that we're signatory to, that says every child shall have the right to life and that every child shall be afforded access to medical treatment.
Well, we'll watch for that. August, you say, George, we'll watch for that bill when it's introduced to the Parliament. Perhaps you might change your mind. Thank you for your time. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Peter.